Hey Andy, this is Sammy.
All
And
right,
you're
good, good.
you're able to hang out with me even though it's the Academy Awards tonight. Don't you have any friends or
Oh,
anything
my
maybe
my
nominated?
wife my wife and I are watching. But it was funny. I was talking to my wife. I'm not a big award show fan. I don't know. I've just never been like a big award show fan. So we're kind of casually watching, but there's nothing that I'm blown away. My two favorite movies of this year were Dolomite Is My Name and Uncut
Eddie.
Gems. They were both snubbed. So.
Mm-hmm. Both comedians though.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I thought both those movies were just freaking brilliant. So
Mm-hmm.
what are you gonna do?
Yeah. So we'll get started if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yo, welcome to my Summer Lair. I am your host, Sammy Younan, and I'm joined by Andy Palmer, whose latest horror movie is Camp Cold Brook. Of course, as you know from most horror movies, nothing bad ever happens to people who go camping, right? It's the 40th anniversary of Friday the 13th. It came out in 1980, surprisingly. So, if people were going to go to summer camp, would they have a better chance of surviving Camp Crystal Lake or Camp Cold Brook?
Well, listen, Jason's a badass. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt about that. He has clear cut a lot of but the thing about Cold Brook is that you have not one scary person, but you have a witch who
Mm-hmm.
lives on the outskirts of town, and then you also have 30, 30 dead campers. So I just think the numbers are in our favor. I think it's a numbers game, and I got to tell you, I'd much rather dodge one scary slasher with a hockey mask than an entire camp of ghost children.
Is that going to be the tagline for the movie?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, scarier than one guy in a hockey mask.
There you.
That is it. That is it. So yeah.
So you've alluded already to the witch and the 30 dead campers. Can you just give us a breakdown of what the legend of Camp Cold Brook is?
Yeah. So the idea of Camp Cold Brook, and it's funny, the idea of the witch in East Bernadou is a bit of a true story. So the writer Alex Carl, when he was a kid, would go up to this camp. It was in Cold Brook, upstate New York, and his parents did this like with a group of other families, did this like kind of like very like serious. I don't want to say competitive because it wasn't like a contest, but they were like very avid square dancers, and they would take all their families up for the weekend. And I guess this camp had a big hall that they could go and they would square dance. And so he said that at night the parents would retire to the hall and do their dancing, and the kids would just they had kind of free reign of this camp. And he said that he and a bunch of his friends were sitting in their camper that night, one night, and he looks out the window, and just kind of almost square in the frame of the house is this woman, and it just terrified him. And so it freaked him out, freaked all the kids out, and they go running into the thing, and they basically are told this story of this woman Anise that supposedly is a witch that lives on the outskirts of the town, and it really stuck with him. I think he said he was 8 when it happened, so it stuck with him his entire life, and so he kind of crafted this story, and it's about a religious camp that the patrons one afternoon accidentally run over the daughter of this woman that has questionable ties to the occult on the outskirts of town, and they refuse to help her and help her child, and so she decides that she's going to exact revenge on their children, and we pay for the sins of our father, the classic horror movie trope,
Mm-hmm.
and she bewitches them and forces them to drown themselves in the creek near Cold Brook. And so we flash forward 20 years to a ghost hunting reality television show that's on its last legs, about to get canceled. And in kind of a Hail Mary attempt to save the show, the host, opens up the floor to his employees and says, "Where can we go that nobody's ever heard of? Some story that's going to really bring us back." And one of his employees says that somebody had posted on their fan site about Cold Brook, and so they decide to go out for a scout to see, if it's worth doing a show about. And once they get there, it is certainly worth doing a show about if they can, escape.
That's always the final thing, right? If you got to make it to sun
That's right.
sun up.
That's right. You gotta make it out of there, and there's plenty of things standing in their way, and even it was funny because it was written into the script, but I was visiting with Alex a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about he went back to Cold Brook as an adult, and it's privately owned now, and he kind of snuck in, but he said that you couldn't see it from the road. It was one of these things where surrounding the camp, it was just completely overgrown. The road that he used to take to get in there had been filled in and stuff like that. But he kind of snuck in and walked in, and he said once he got there, somebody is keeping it up because it was like frozen in time. But the grass is mowed, and there's no degradation to the buildings and stuff like that. And it was kind of eerie that the world had kind of shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
It was been shut off to the outside world, but it existed, and it was kind of still in time. And we created that same sort of vibe. Is like whatever happened that night, the camp just stayed that way. It wasn't, and it was just kind of like locked in time and stuff like that.
Yeah, camps are interesting because they are sort of out of time and out of place, right? Because there's no you don't go there to use Wi-Fi or computers or anything like that, right? You're just swimming, canoeing, and nature things and trees and stuff. They don't really necessarily kind of age. It always looks the same. They're just out of time.
Well, and it's a perfect backdrop because that's the real trick in any horror movie now is the cell phone is the ultimate bailout, and so it's like the secret in any horror movie now is how do we get rid of cell phones? How do we justify getting rid of this technology that can help us easily escape something? And so that backdrop of them being there is great because they're isolated, and the sheriff says I don't have the resources to bail you guys out if something goes wrong up there, and they sort of laugh that off. They've been to, I'm sure, 3 seasons of creepy places, but this camp is different for sure.
Yeah, did you watch any of these kind of Ghost Hunters or these kind of paranormal type of haunted house TV shows that have been cropping up the last couple of years?
Absolutely. There's definitely some good shout outs to that. The first scene when Jack sees something down near the dining hall, and he goes out with the camera, and he's doing his very kind of official haunt squad sort of intro and stuff like that. And I actually came up in reality television. I still edit reality television and stuff like that, and so I know kind of the behind the scenes and what it's like. What's the reality versus what goes on in the camera, and what you see in the movie is that these guys they've never seen anything, and so when they get there they kind of set stuff up, and then they're just sitting around the campfire drinking, and it's like it's kind of like this summer camp in and of itself. But then the camera goes on, and he's like, Jack Wilson here for Haunt Squad. he goes into that mode, and that's what all these shows do and stuff like that, where it's just like you're trying to build the suspense out of really what inevitably almost always is absolutely nothing. So it's all these things where he's like, something there's a smell of sulfur in the it's like they're doing all these things to try to get the audience to be like, dude, something is there.
It's a good callback as well to Blair Witch, right, where they kind of turned the cameras on themselves, and they were like, I hear something coming, and it's creepy, and you can hear the wood snap, the twigs and stuff snapping.
Yep, absolutely.
There's something there, but I don't know what it is. But because the camera's on them, they're doing a selfie shot. It's like, well, then turn the camera around. Show me what it is.
Exactly. And we had when I first got the script from my manager and it was kind of pitched to me, more like a Blair Witch movie where it was like the whole thing was found footage and everything was going to be told from the kind of the ghost hunting perspective. And I wasn't crazy about that. I have all the respect in the world for found footage movies, especially 2 that come to mind. One is called The Taking of Deborah Logan, which is like a genius film. If you haven't seen it, or your audience hasn't seen it, It's incredible. Adam Robitel, who directed the Escape Room, he's directing the Escape Room movies, and he wrote one of the Paranormal Activities. He wrote and directed it, and it is a genius film. And then another one, the original Paranormal Activity scared me just half to death, and so I have a ton of respect for those films. But as like a filmmaker, they don't really, it doesn't really, not something I'm super excited about. but I wanted to have an element of that. So we decided visually, my DP and I, just to kind of flip the script. And so the idea was the narrative stuff, the stuff that we're watching as the audience and that you're involved in, is shot sort of freestyle and handheld. We didn't have any tripods or anything like that on set. It was, to kind of give you this idea of, even though it's still traditionally shot, you're kind of there with them. It's a little bit more freestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they go into the found footage element, instead of that like classic shaky cam, like running through the woods and you as the audience member can't see anything, we wrote in there that they had these new gimbal cams. And so Jack turns it on, and all of a sudden you're just kind of like very slinkily going through the camp, and it's very creepy, like you're on kind of a dolly, that sort of classic horror POV that you get, in 80s horror movies and stuff like that. And it became a really scary tool. That scene where Jack is in the beginning is a nice tension build up, and then we have another scene with Danielle Harris, who plays Angela, and she does it. And I honestly, when I got into post, I was like, man, I should have done that more, because it was a really effective storytelling tool of building up tension and stuff like that.
And it's just the way that they're lit too, right? Because you have a small circle of light, and then the rest is kind of all darkness.
All falls off,
right? And there's all kinds of woods and things that are around them. So it's hard to, like, there could be something anywhere, basically.
Anywhere,
right?
Absolutely.
And so as they moving forward, you're like, I don't know about this. And then you mentioned like that scene with Danielle Harris, like there's the swings and stuff like that start to move and be activated, like you said, the creepy kids kind of playing.
Yes. Oh, and that's what I wanted. There was kind of two levels. The script is, when I got it from Alex, was probably a little bit darker, and I'm certainly known for more of my horror. I'm kind of known as like horror light, like I don't get too crazy. My stuff's a little on the tamer side, and but it worked out perfectly because Joe Dante was our executive producer, and he did Gremlins and The Howling and The Burbs and stuff like that. And so there's even in his more hardcore stuff, like you talk about The Howling and stuff like that, there's kind of an inherent innocence to Joe's stuff, and and I wanted to like capture that. And so when we started coming up with the gags for the movie, with the campers, I wanted the campers to do gags that little kids would do, So there's a scene where Kevin gets messed with in one of the cabins, and they tie his shoelaces together. And the same thing with Danielle, is that she's in this big kind of like this recreation area of the park, and these swings start to swing, and this little ghost runs behind her and tells her she's it and stuff like that. And it's just this idea that, like, to them this is absolutely terrifying, and to these kids that probably don't even know they're dead, they're just having a good time,
Kids are kids.
Kids are kids, even in the afterlife.
Yes. I want to pick up on something you've already said, which is that you worked as an editor on a number of reality shows. You worked on like Flavor of Love, that's the Flavor Flav show.
Yes, sir.
Rock of Love, the Brett Michaels show. I Love Money on VH1.
Yeah.
Is there similarities how you edit these TV shows to horror movies? The way that you got to handle the suspense, the reveal, you got to balance drama with tension. Are there kind of similarities in terms of like how you approach the editing of a horror movie to a reality show?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like, the techniques vary and stuff like that, but I feel really blessed that I came up in reality television. And it's funny, we get kind of, in the circles of entertainment, I don't think that reality television is looked at in the kind of the same reverence as narrative work is. But I feel completely blessed, because the thing about reality is that you are writing, you are basically going out and capturing an idea, and then you're writing the story in post-production. And so as an editor in reality television, I wasn't, being like, here's the script, here's the footage, now make it interesting. It was, here's what we're trying to sell, do whatever you can to do this, or we don't really like the way this is going, so I need you to manipulate the footage in a way that you're saying this. And so it really taught me to just use anything I could get my hands on, reaction shots, cutaways, using outtakes and stuff like that to sell the idea of a story. And so I attack every movie in post-production with, it's not what's here, it's what can this be, and that's the thing, is like my first film, I always tell this story. I had a movie called Find Me, and I had this kind of creepy moment, and we were rushing to get it done, and when I started cutting it together, it just completely fell flat. Nothing good about it, and I was so bummed. And then I remembered that the Saturday before, it was like one of our off days, we had done a makeup test of the main actress in the ghost costume and makeup, because we wanted to see the ghost appeared in the daytime a lot. We wanted to just see how, what we needed to do to make her still creepy, but in the daytime in the house. And that scene happened to be in the daytime. So I opened up all that footage of just us just effing around and shooting the ghost in these different locations. And there was one shot of the ghost all the way through the house, because it was like this kind of ranch-style house that opened up from the living room through the kitchen to the next kind of section of the house. And we had her playing very long. So I took that shot, and then I have my main character go in, and she opens up this closet, and she pulls something out. And then when she closes the door, I did this hard cut to the ghost in the far doorway, and it makes a nice little jump scare.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, if I didn't edit reality TV, I never would have thought to just use some junk footage from, from Saturday, but that's what it was. And then all of a sudden that moment became big. And so that's why, reality editing and reality television it's an amazing training ground for storytelling, because you're crafting a story after the fact. And that becomes very important in indie film,
Yeah, well, especially like in a movie like Camp Cold Brook, where it's set in the present. Like reality TV is kind of like the illusion that it's all like happening to this to the like Flavor Flav or whoever it is that you're working with, right? And so it's like the same thing. Like a horror thing happens almost linearly, right? Like it's happening incident after incident and starts to escalate, right? And so it's like, and it's the audience is the same way. They're just kind of reacting to these kind of like incidents and these moments and these reveals as this information kind of comes up. It's very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. There's definitely a lot of parallels, and it's creating believability out of an unbelievable situation, And
that's
so
a good way to put it.
That's where they're similar,
Yeah, and instead of Flavor Flav this time around, you had Chad Michael Murray and you had Danielle
Harris.
Harris.
Close. It was very close between the two of them. It was between Flavor Flav and Chad Michael Murray, but I went with Chad. I felt like that was a better choice. No, but yeah, we did. We had both Chad and Danielle, and we were absolutely I keep saying the word blessed, but we were absolutely blessed to have those two. And Danielle, I've been a huge fan of forever, and Chad as well. Full disclosure, I was more of a Dawson's Creek fan than One Tree Hill, but he was on the creek, so it all worked out. But they were both amazing, and it's just when you work with people that have been doing it for so long and as much as they have, they elevate everything from the cast to the crew, because it's like their level of preparedness, professionalism, the fact that like we always were like 2-3 takes and we move on, 2-3 takes and we move on, because they're so good, and it's just like they deliver, and they always hit the right spot. They know exactly where the camera is. They know, Danielle knows what is scary, what she needs to do in every single moment, and it was fantastic. And they're both just, and then to top it off, they're both just really great people,
Yeah, so I just want to pick up on that. Like, both of them have done some horror movies. Chad has done like House of Wax. He did Left Behind, which is kind of horror.
Sure. I think he did Haunting in Connecticut too.
Yeah. Danielle Harris has done a couple of Halloween movies, Urban Legend. So does having that horror background, that kind of gives you a shorthand, makes it a little bit more easier so that the actors kind of know what you're going for, right? Because this is not like like we said before, where like Jason, where there's somebody kind of like serial killer slasher type movie. This is more like there's ghosts and other things kind of happening. So that kind of background, that horror background, makes it easier as a shorthand, right?
It makes it so much easier, and it makes it so much easier for me. I mean, the perfect example is, Danielle has that, we were talking about that scene in the kind of play area there. The whole idea of the way that shot plays out, and I don't want to give too much away, but the way that the shot, her reaction, and kind of like these little things we did to emphasize it and stuff like that, those were her idea. She's like, oh, if we got this little wind machine and we did this and this, and then we come up at this exact point, I think it would be really scary. And I was like, cool, and so it's like, she's been around the block. She knows how to create tension, and they were great, and they were great collaborators on set. And, it was, it just makes my job so easy, especially in an indie film where there's so many kind of outside problems that can arise and stuff like that. I never had to worry about, once the cameras were rolling, I knew I was always going to get exactly what I needed. there were times when we kind of look at our schedule and wonder how we were going to get away with everything. But when they move so well and everybody kind of steps up to the plate, you could just knock out scenes in a matter of hours, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah. One of the things too is there's always that thin line between comedy and horror. This one, for the most part, is a horror. Although I noticed that when Jack, who was played by Chad Michael Murray, when he's sorting through his mail, his address is 742 Evergreen Terrace.
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
So you got a little Simpsons nod in there. I appreciate that.
Yep. Yep. Well, my favorite genre is comedy. I've directed 2 horror comedies. And like I said, even Cold Brook, which was darker in tone, when Joe came on board to executive produce, I wanted to add a lightness to it. I always think that horror always needs a little brevity. You need those moments to breathe. And there are some really fun conversations that happen in the movie, some good lines and stuff like that. And again, like, because Joe, he had paid so many like fun homages to Steven Spielberg and Gremlins. If you watch like Gremlins, there's the billboard of Rock and Ricky Rialto, and he's dressed up like like Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. I did that too. And so there's if you are a Dante fan, there's probably like 15 or 16 nods to Joe in there. Both like there's lines that characters say that are like lines from his movies. There's some like there's a bunch of like stuff like in production design where if you look up and you're like, oh, that was from Gremlins 2 and stuff like that. And so that was a lot of fun. So there's a lot of like insider, but the thing that I love is the stuff when they're my favorite scene, outside of all the scare scenes, is the scene around the campfire, because that actually the scene that Danielle talks about is a true story. So when my producing partner and I were scouting locations for our movie before the Funhouse Massacre, we were at the Mansfield Reformatory in Ohio, where they shot like Shawshank Redemption. They've shot a ton of movies at this place. And we were in this kind of main cell block area, and the wind kicked up because it was the middle of winter time, and the wind kicked up, and it sounded like werewolves just howling through, however the wind connected with like the old building and the holes and the bars and everything like that. And it was terrifying, and it was just like that kind of, those kind of like funny stories and stuff like that. I like that lightness. It just is a nice contrast to the scares.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Joe Dante a couple of times. How did he come into your life? Because that's a huge influence and like a huge cinema person to have in your life and be working with.
Yeah. So we when Funhouse Massacre came out on video, my manager started just reaching out to producers, with my stuff in the movie and how it was doing and stuff like that. And Renfield Productions, which is Joe's company, they had gotten in touch with my manager. And I met with Joe's partner, Mark Allen, and Mark said, hey, man, we really love Funhouse. He's like, Joe is doing this kind of series of movies called Joe Dante Presents. And, Joe, when he came up through Roger Corman. He edited trailers for Roger. He directed Piranha for Roger. And Joe rightly points out, and he says it all the time, he's like, that was like a great training ground for filmmakers. And you see who came out of working with Roger Corman. You have Ron Howard, you have James Cameron, you have Joe Dante, you have all these guys that came out of working for Roger Corman. And he said, we don't have that anymore, and I want to kind of create that. And so Mark said, if you have a script that you think would be great for us, let us know. And, he's like, we come on board, we help you out, we put your name, Joe's name on it, helps you with financing and stuff, stuff like that. And so that's how it happened. And so when I found Camp Cold Brook, I sent it to Mark, and he really liked it, and we just kind of took it from there.
Is he going to be working on more films as a director? Do you know, or when you've talked to him?
Yeah. He has speaking of Corman, he has a passion project called The Man with Kaleidoscope Eyes, which is all about Roger Corman, and it's kind of
Bill Hader?
Yeah. So Bill was or is still attached.
Yeah, I remember reading something about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Elijah Wood's company is the one that's trying to get financing for it and stuff like that. And it had gotten close a few times before, and then didn't matriculate. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like even legends like Joe Dante have trouble getting certain films off the ground,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I think it's a passion project for him, and he also directs a ton of TV. He does Hawaii Five-0. I think he did Flash for a while. and stuff like that. So, and then he has his Trailers from Hell website and stuff like that. So he's very active, and he's such a kind guy. And he, when we first kind of sat down, and I asked him, like, are you coming to Oklahoma? Like, how does this work? He goes, oh no. He's like, I'm not here to get in your way. I'm not here to tell you how to do anything. He's like, I'm here to just support you, and I'll give you some notes and stuff like that. And that was it. It was like he let me go make the film. We came back. We watched a rough cut in his screening room, and I was just sweating bullets. And he was just super nice. And he just, he's like, hey, this works. This doesn't work. Here may be some ideas and stuff like that. And it was just, you couldn't ask for, it's kind of a dream scenario for a director to have that kind of experience giving you advice, but not feeling like, in any way he had to like take over anything.
Yeah, we've kind of lost some of that mentorship with, like, we mentioned, like Roger Corman,
Yeah.
like what Joe was doing.
Yep.
It's almost like it's almost like they just kind of expect filmmakers now just have to figure out how to make a movie, just kind of go do it. Like, there's no mentorship.
It's such a strange time, and it's a very strange time to be making films, because on one hand, there's never been a better time to be an independent filmmaker, because the resources have never been more attainable and more affordable. You can take an iPhone and you can go with the proper technique and proper lighting and stuff like that. You can go make a great movie, and it doesn't even have to be an iPhone. It can be a DSLR. Red cameras are extremely cheap, and so there's not a cost problem, and distribution is not a problem. If you make a film, getting it out into the world is not a problem anymore. That used to be like the golden ticket. Is, oh, I got my film distributed by somebody. That is not a challenge anymore. You can distribute the film yourself. There's outlets galore. The problem is that it's never been a harder time to be an independent filmmaker, because there's so much content, and to be able to monetize that and be able to pay your investors back has never been more difficult. With VHS and then into DVD, physical media had a really nice markup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your films would do, there was a market for, and when Joe was coming up through Corman, it was the drive-in market. So the drive-in market segued into VHS segued into DVD, and now we don't have that segue anymore. Physical media is getting less and less, and VOD does not make up the difference, because it's the ratio to what a filmmaker takes to what the distributor takes is just silly. And so it's difficult to then get your movie out, cut through all the traffic, all the noise of all these other films, and then also have the film become not even profitable, but even break even is a daunting task. So it's a challenge in that regard. And I think that the nice middle ground is the streaming services as far as mid-tier movies. Like, I'd like to, hopefully Cold Brook catches somebody's eye, and then I could segue into doing something for Blumhouse over at Hulu for their Into the Dark series, or Netflix. And the nice thing about that is that it allows the filmmaker to tell the story they want to tell, but the pressure is not like, if this movie doesn't do extremely well, then you're never going to make a movie again. And that's what's been missing, is that you see all these indie filmmakers, they make this kind of indie film, it gets to Sundance, and then the next thing you know, they're directing a huge studio tentpole where they have no power to do anything. It's just movie by committee. And for young filmmakers to try to navigate that, some do well and some don't. And so I think that we're coming into an era with the streaming services where that middle ground is happening again, where you can make a cool indie, it gets noticed, and then all of a sudden you're doing something, sort of mid-tier on a Netflix or a Hulu. So I'm optimistic that's going to be where that lack of physical media and stuff like that will segue, is that, if you make a movie, even if it doesn't make a ton of money, hopefully you get recognized, so you get to go make something, something that more people will see.
Does genre then help in that factor, in that decision too? Like, because horror has a huge community, obviously, right?
Absolutely.
If you make something for that community and it's good, they will love you and support you.
Yeah, and that's why I love, it's one of those things, like I said, I'm a huge comedy fan. I got into film to do comedies and stuff like that. I kind of started started with horror for that reason, is that it was easier to get a horror movie made. You didn't really have to rely on name actors as much. But what I fell in love with in horror was the community. I mean, I love horror fans. They're the kindest and just most fervent fan base that there is in cinema. And every time we go to Horror Hound, every time we go to one of these conventions or anything like that, the people you meet are they're amazing. And for that reason, I'll keep making horror movies. I'll keep making horror movies forever because they're amazing. And yeah, there is a fan base. And I always say that horror fans they're unique to movie fans. Is like most general movie fans want to go into a movie. They want to love it. You go to whatever you're going to take your wife to on a Friday night. You're like, ooh, I hope this movie's good.
Mm-hmm.
And horror fans are kind of the opposite because there's so many bad horror movies. Horror fans generally go into a movie wanting to hate it. They're like, all right, how am I going to tear this son of a bitch apart?
Yeah.
And then if you win them over, if it's a story that they find compelling, they will be like, they'll have your back forever,
mm-hmm.
And I've been really lucky to like meet people that saw my first film and continue on and watch all my films and buy my stuff and promote my stuff. And, they're a great community in that regard.
How did horror movies come into your life? What was the gateway horror movie that got you hooked?
The first one, there's two that like really like affected me as a kid. I wasn't my folks were pretty protective of me, so I didn't get to watch a lot of horror movies until later, which is why I think I'm still scared of horror movies. Like my wife won't go to the theater with me to a horror movie because I still hide my eyes, and it's rather embarrassing. And my wife, her grandfather owned this like drive-in movie theater in the Philippines when she was a kid, and he used to get all the horror movies, and so she is completely not affected by horror movies. She just like she'll just sit there and watch them stone face, and I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? My go-to is I always wear a hat to horror movies, and I just pull the hat over my eyes if it gets scary. But that's I guess I think why I love them. But the two that nailed me as a kid, the first was this, and you're gonna laugh at me. It was a Disney movie called Watcher in the Woods. Have you ever seen it?
No. What is this one? Tell me.
So Disney did a lot of like live action. They did Apple Dumpling Game and Herbie Rides Again and stuff like that. But they did a haunted house movie called The Watcher in the Woods. I think it was Joan Crawford was in it, if I'm not mistaken. And it is effing terrifying. It's very scary. Great jump scares, great visuals and stuff like that. And I saw it at my buddy Evan Gibbard's birthday party, and his mom, I think, had rented it as like, well, this will be safe. We all wanted like a scary movie, and so she's like, well, this should be safe enough. And I remember there's just some terrific jump scares in this movie, and I remember being very scared. And then the second one is, I think it was the same year, is the original Halloween. Our local theater, Movie Land, had a 16 millimeter print of Halloween, and every Halloween they would play it at like 10 o'clock. And they would let like we would get to go trick or treating, and then they just if we had a permission slip from our mom, they would let us into the theater with all our candy and all of our friends, and we got to watch Halloween. And Michael Myers on the big screen in that first one. There's so many moments that just absolutely just get me, and they still get me. And I think that's of the slasher still my favorite franchise, to be sure. And so those two movies definitely got me. And
Halloween for sure, because of that iconic soundtrack too.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, it just chills your bones to this day. The moment you hear it, and that one just got me. I'll never forget sitting in that theater watching that with my friends.
Mm-hmm. Disney's been bringing back a lot of these older movies now because they have Disney Plus, so it'll be interesting to see if they dust off that one.
Dude, I hope they do. It's not on there. I've already checked.
Okay.
But I hope they do. I think you can get it though on DVD. I've seen it at like video stores and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a really good one. It was a really good one. I need to get it. But yeah, I hope the Disney Plus. I hope Disney Plus brings it back.
There was quite a bit of in the 70s and 80s. Disney did quite a bit of horror movies. They cranked out a number of them.
Did they really?
Yeah, there was like there was one I think it was called The Boogeyman, and the family ended up sucking the boogeyman into a vacuum at the end. So it got a little.
No, dude! Oh my God, I gotta watch that. It's a little
Disney-ish.
That sounds like its own documentary. That's so cool.
Yeah. They had that cartoon with the what do you call it? The Ichabod Crane and the
Dude, yeah, Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
yeah,
That is
that's what I
actually
couldn't remember.
that's a
Yeah.
really good one. Yeah, yeah, I
So they
love
had a
that one.
little bit of like I think there was some guy that they just randomly hired. He's like, let's do horror, and then they
Yeah.
cranked a whole bunch
Oh
out.
my
And they're
God.
like, no, let's. I think we should just stick with the Herbie Lovebug movies.
Right, right, exactly. They're
Yeah.
like, listen, Davy Crockett, and that's as Davy Crockett fights off zombies.
Yes.
That'll be the next one. That'll be great.
So Camp Cold Brook comes out on February 14 on video demand and in cinemas.
That's correct. Yeah, limited theatrical. And I think we have on our Petrie website posted what theaters it's in. But then it's available VOD everywhere else, and then it's going to come out in DVD in April.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually up for everything's up for pre-order on Apple Vudu for VOD, and I'm sure the other VOD sites as well. And then it's the DVD and Blu-ray are up for pre-order on Amazon right now, and definitely, I mean, as a lover of the physical media, I'd say get it on iTunes, but if you love us, get the Blu-ray, because we have some great special features. We did audio commentary of the film with Mark Allen, Joe Dante, Danielle Harris, and Alex Carl, the writer. I have a Haunt Squad blooper reel that's a lot of fun.
Oh, nice.
That has a great moment where we were poking fun at the filmography of Danielle Harris. So it's a really good moment. And then we have this great section. The writer and I, Alex Carl, sit down. We were doing like a podcast, and we sit down and we talk about kind of the thing about like the movie, the right movie you shoot and movie you edit, and how it changed from his script to the way we shot it to the way we edited the film. And there's 10 minutes of the film that's never before seen, but it was actually the opening of the film. So the opening of the film was what happened at the camp.
Yeah.
In one big chunk, and I loved it so much. And we shot it, and I shot it different stylistically than the rest of the movie. I shot it like Joe Dante would shoot it, like an 80s movie, and so it's kind of classically shot with the blue light and like kind of the blue moonlight, and we have like the dolly. It's on dollies and sticks and Steadicam and stuff like that. And it was just kind of like me being like, hey, this is the way Joe would do it. This is the way I'm doing it. And ultimately, when we got into the edit, it just story-wise didn't work. It gave a little too much of the legend away, and so it made the rest of the movie fall flat. And so we took those elements, we cut them up, and we put them into the flashback scenes, which work much better. But you get to see that first 10 minutes on the Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of like physical media, like when Funhouse Massacre came out, a lot of people end up becoming Dollface cosplay, doing Dollface cosplay.
Listen, if I never win an award for anything, just the fact that people will text me and be like, "Oh, I was Dollface for Halloween," and like there was a woman in Australia that texted me, and she had gotten Dollface tattooed on herself.
Wow.
And stuff like that. Like, I mean, that's like I can't ask for a bigger compliment as a storyteller than people committing an image to their skin, in perpetuity. It's just. Yeah, man, I love that we've created these characters that people identify with, and Funhouse Massacre is slowly becoming this kind of fun cult hit, and I have people hitting me up every year saying, we watch this is one of our new Halloween traditions and stuff like that. And
that's a big honor there to like be part of a Halloween tradition. Huge.
And it just, I feel so lucky to have gotten to make fun films that resonate with people. And they stick with people. I remember, when we were doing Horror Hound, and Joe and I were sitting at the table. He was signing before the screening and stuff like that. And this young man came up to him and he goes, my dad and I, we don't see eye to eye on a lot. And we don't get along. And he goes, but every Christmas he and I sit down and we watch Gremlins together. That's our tradition. It's what and Joe's he's so nonchalant about stuff. I think he's very unimpressed with his own success and stuff like that. And he was like, "Oh, that's so nice. I'm so happy." And I'm sitting over here like tears like streaming down my face to be like, if somebody came up to me and said that, I don't even know what I would do, And I think that as storytellers, we have that capacity, and I can't think of any greater honor,
Mm-hmm. Do you want to give the website or some of the social media where people can find Camp Cold Brook?
Yeah, absolutely. Check out Facebook. Check out Petri Entertainment, Petri Entertainment, like the dish, and that'll give you all the good deets on Camp Cold Brook. I'm at Petri Andy on Twitter and at Director Andy Palmer on Instagram. And yeah, just head over to iTunes, head over to Vudu, head over to Amazon, and click that pre-order button because it's huge for us. And then I don't know if anybody knows, but I have another movie coming out this year called Witness Infection, another horror comedy, and we premiere at the Haw Comedy Arts Festival in San Antonio in February 20th. So if you guys are in San Antonio and you want to take a break from the Alamo tour, come watch our movie.
Nice. And you're also working on a Michael Jackson documentary?
I am. I start that on the 24th. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who is that company, or is that who? Can you talk about that at all, or?
I can't say too much about it because it's we haven't even started yet. But I'm editing it, and I'm excited to hop on board. I don't other than just having talked with the executive producer very briefly and stuff like that. But I'm excited to get started on it. I'm interested to see what we're going to talk about with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we covered like the big things, right? We covered that you could potentially survive Camp Cold Brook.
Yes.
That it's coming out on February 14 in limited release and on video on demand. And that when you had a choice between Flavor Flav and Chad Michael Murray, you decided to go with Chad Michael Murray as your lead.
Yeah, boy, I did. I had to go with Chad. Not that I don't love Flav.
Yeah. Maybe you'll work with Flav down the road again. He'd be great for a horror movie.
Absolutely, he'd be fantastic. I think we knocked it all out. That was very good.
Okay, great.
Sammy, you're the man.
There you go. All right, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate it, brother. All right, man. Bye.
Yep, so that was my conversation with director Andy Palmer, who, as we said, the movie is Camp Cold Brook. It'll be coming out Valentine's Day. It's always good to kind of take your lady friend out for a nice date and then get a little bit of scare and terror. You can talk to me about VRP on Instagram, on Facebook, and on the Twitter. They're all My Pal Sammy for all three. My Pal Sammy. Thanks for listening to me in a Netflix world. Horror movies, yo.